Canada's trade delegation is in Washington as a deadline looms for Donald Trump's new 50% tariffs on hundreds of Canadian products. For the latest on where things stand, let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cecchini. So, Reggie, Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc returned to the American capital, and he is there to hold talks with U.S. officials. What do we know exactly about how these negotiations are going so far?
Well, Miranda, we know that they are going to take place with American officials along with Canada's chief trade negotiator, Janice Charette. This is going to be a day long, a day's worth of meetings, both at the Canadian Embassy and behind me at the office of the U.S. Trade Rep. And realistically, what the Canadians are looking to do is get a better and more comprehensive trade deal. We know that in the next week, Donald Trump has announced that some $20 billion worth of Canadian goods are going to be hit with 50% tariffs. And obviously these Canadian officials are down here trying to walk some of that back and press the administration to either lessen that number or take it away altogether. Well, at the same time, they're looking for sectoral relief on some of those crucial exports from Canada, like aluminum autos and softwood lumber. And there's going to be a big question here as to what ultimately constitutes a deal for the Canadians that will either be acceptable or force them to walk away. And our sources have told our colleagues in Ottawa that particularly in those 50% tariffs, if they were to come in place in full, that there's a chance that the Canadians could simply walk away. There's also the issue of booze on the shelves in Canada. We know that the Premier of Quebec has said that there could be a potential deal here to return the booze to shelves. This has been a sticking point for Americans. Both Democratic and Republican lawmakers have sent notes to Canadian officials urging them to put that liquor back. But so many premiers have decided to not do that. But we know that that is a part of the conversation here. How that would roll forward is a question, given that that is a provincial prerogative to keep the liquor off of the shelves. It's also a question too, Miranda, if that liquor were to return, would Canadians buy it? If they don't, it being on the shelves, would that simply be a win on optics? So there's a lot here for the trade minister and for the chief negotiator to work through, along with that potential here to try and get some kind of formal talk started on USMCA or CUSMA. We know they've been going on with the Mexicans. It has not formally started with the Canadians. And again, this is now a matter of time.
All right, we'll be watching those talks closely, Reggie. Now, another headline out of the U.S. Capitol. The Washington Post is reporting that Donald Trump secretly flew out of last month's NATO Summit in Turkey on a smaller military aircraft due to an Iranian assassination threat. How is the White House responding to these new details?
Well, I mean, look, we should point out that for the last several weeks, the White House has been pushing back on reporting that there are, a lacking defense capability on the new Air Force One or the new bridge plane for the president that came from the Qatari government. They've been arguing that this is simply needed for transport for the president. It's now out of service, but you're right. When he left Ankara at the NATO Summit, he left on one of the legacy blue and white Air Force Ones. Originally, the president tried to say that it was for a reason to get the new plane in place so that the troops could look at it. What we've ultimately learned here from the Washington Post is when Donald Trump boarded that legacy Air Force One, he walked to the back of the plane. He then boarded a catering truck, which then took him to a separate military plane. And at one point, the protective pool that follows the president, they put out one of their reports to suggest that while they were sitting on the plane, they were told by administration officials that they needed to close the shades. The president tried to say that this was for a security reason, didn't really elaborate on that. It's now believed it's because it was to prevent the press from seeing the president get on this catering truck and then go on a different plane. It's worth pointing out, though, that the press and most of Trump's staff were left on that plane, which kept the Air Force One call sign, even though Trump wasn't on it. So significant concerns here and questions about what the ultimate threat was against the president. This is something that we've heard from the Iranians before. They've done this against numerous presidents in the past. Also questions here about what the safety is of this new bridge plane, if it's going to come back into service here, and what we may get from the White House on this later in the day.
All right, Reggie, thanks so much for those updates. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is our Reggie Cecchini reporting from Washington.